Welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Advice, thoughts, and stories from a married couple on cybersecurity, technology, and life in general. Now here are your hosts, Didi and Lital.
Hello and welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Oh, we have thumbs up already on our Zoom. How are you doing?
I don't know. How are you doing?
Doing well. Well, it's a week after the big BlueScreenPalooza.
Yes.
So we're going to chat about that a little bit. But other than that, I'm good. Life is so calm.
Yes, life is
Nothing is happening.
Well, my life was
fine.
My life was chaos and confusion. I learned why I love home so much because this week I was in the office all week, which was awesome experience because I got to meet up with people, talk to people, and experience the person experience, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I was offsite and did the same in San Jose. And before that, we were traveling in Ireland. So basically, I think you asked me why I slept like 9 hours today, and this is the first day in like a long time that I could just sleep in peace in my own bed. But before we go into the blue screens and how it was disrupting everything, including the travel for everybody into my offsite, into that offsite, and poor Kim that had to stay and they got home like at 1 o'clock at night because of our friends at CrowdStrike. I do want to talk about the thing that bugs me the most, really bugs me, irks me to levels that you wouldn't believe. And that's the New York Times 100 best books of the 21st century list.
Why did it upset you so much?
So, remember, books are life-changing. I read a book that was life-changing to me when I was 10 years old.
Which one?
The Never-Ending Story. After I saw the movie, I read the book. And there's the part where the shop owner tells Bastian, I sell here some small rectangular objects known as books. And it doesn't go beep beep and it doesn't go this, and can you appreciate that? And for me, books have been an important part of my life and an important part of my existence and an important part of my culture. If you remember when you and Omri and everybody got upset about this whole woke thing, I told you read 1984 because it explains doublethink, double change, all these things that we experience today.
New speech.
Exactly. These things are carried by books. We, the living, impacted my life a lot. Because everybody wants to grow up to be a communist. And when you read Ayn Rand, you understand that communist means stupid. And there's a whole bunch of things in life that were changed thanks to books in my life. Reading Twain, understanding the value of human life. Even in that list, there was a very good book that is very life-changing, Never Let Me Go, which is a very interesting book by a Japanese person that talks about modern slavery. And people don't understand this. And this is the thing that people need to understand. Books matter. They, very much like our next week's podcast that we're going to talk about discipline, books are a method of achieving discipline. And the New York Times used to be the best example of the best in what you need to read. For years, I read whatever showed up on the New York Times review list. I read, and slowly I stopped. I think one of the first times I stopped treating them seriously is when they put My Brilliant Friend as like, wow, what a big thing. I said, no, that's a piece of shit. I couldn't survive that book.
Which book?
My Brilliant Friend.
My Brilliant Friend.
Stupid book.
Okay.
But the whole idea it is that books define our perception of reality. And that list ignored some of the most important things that happened in the 21st century. So they ignored the Game of Thrones series. The Storm of Swords came out in 2000. Everybody knows what Red Wedding means. It's a term. It's a term in our speech. It will be so for the next 50 years. Ignoring that because, I like the esoteric, useless things rather than the main things that were impactful is telling. Second thing that was completely ignored because of politics is J.K. Rowling. You can't ignore, in the 21st century, Harry Potter. You can think whatever you want about J.K. Rowling. I admire her, by the way, a lot. But you can't ignore J.K. Rowling. And ignoring Harry Potter is a political statement and being assholes. The book that they chose from Cormac McCarthy, who's an amazing writer, the No Country for Old Men, All the Pretty Horses, they chose The Road, which I think is a very important book. Dave, I don't know if you've read it, but it's like an important book to read as a parent. It shows the sacrifice you make as a parent, even if it's a science fiction book and it talks about the post-apocalyptic world. It actually talks about the relations between a father and a son. But they ignored all his really important books that deal with the immigration controversy because they don't want to deal with that politics. And ignoring the border between us and Mexico and all the things that are happening there because of politics makes you stupid, because he made some amazing books in that space and you can't ignore those. So ignoring influential books because of politics, that was one thing. Trying to esoteric and show how smart you are by ignoring Stephen King. All his post-accident books were written in the 2000s. Even his On Writing is probably one of the best autobiographies I've ever read. And understanding one of the most influential writers in the last 100 years, ignoring him completely, even though they asked for his feedback. They asked him for feedback, so he helped build the list. But when they were talking in the podcast about building the list, they said, yeah, he wrote a couple books about himself. And ignoring that, and I think they deliberately...
They made a joke. They made it look like a joke, that he self-recommended his own books.
Some of his books are super impactful. Fairy Tale is probably one of the best books I've ever read. It's both fantasy and parenting and relationship of kids and growing up. It's so telling. And responsibility and discipline. Ignoring Neil Gaiman because of his politics. Tori Amos even mentioned Neil Gaiman in her songs. People mention Neil Gaiman in their songs because he was so influential in the creation of so many things. American Gods is probably one of the best books of the 21st century. Ignoring all these books because of politics, ignoring Neil Stephenson because of politics. It's just so telling. So I really, really disliked that list because of all the bad things it said. And even the books that were included by some of the authors are very telling because they chose the watered down versions of some of the authors like Philip Roth and Cormac McCarthy. Choosing down the watered down version is really pissing me off. So that's kind of my rant.
Well, because there is no sports,
yes,
we ignore the Olympics. Well, it didn't start yet. Starting tonight.
But if you listen to this one and you see my post when I'll post towards this one, please tell me your top 10 books of the 21st century, because I'm trying to compile a list.
So you'll have your own 100 to compete with the New York Times. Let's do that.
Exactly.
Didi's version versus New York Times.
Exactly.
There's no better person to do it.
Thank you.
I think.
Thank you.
Yep. You read it all.
I've read it all. By the way, I still read a book a week. I think, speaking of discipline and keeping up in shape, this is one of the things that will prevent us all from having Alzheimer's. Stop doom scrolling, read more.
Cool.
With that, one of the things I've been reading a lot about is Windows kernel APIs.
Well, we had to this week. We all kind of followed it, and everybody's demand was that there's going to be a Didi and Lital show about the CrowdStrike failure. So we're going to share our opinion, and let's talk about it.
Yes. And by the way, one of the things that is really fascinating is that CrowdStrike chose to do something that I'm also guilty of doing. So
what is that?
So when Dennis and I were building CDO, we knew that there's parts of the code that we won't be able to change because it's deployed with customer sites and things like that. Customers will be very sensitive about upgrading things, changing things. So what we built was an engine that we can inject scripts from the cloud directly into the processing engine. That's why we built something in TypeScript and JavaScript. So we can inject scriptable code that will be run through a stable part of the system. So people review the code and but we still inject scripts that run and can still have a chance to break everybody's firewalls. And it's still, by the way, hopefully still there, up and running. But that was our way of circumventing change regulations and change processes. And CrowdStrike did something very, very similar, but they did this in a much riskier way because they put something in everybody's Windows kernels that you take the definition codes and basically make them programmable elements, not just the definitions of and prints, but make it programmable and inject this. And that piece of code did not go through the review, the very tight review of what you need to do to inject. Basically Windows kernel mode. By the way,
let me jump in for a second, because you're already diving into that as always, and
because I'm a nerd.
You've been on a rant already for 15 minutes. I want to start by saying, and I think we've already mentioned CrowdStrike a few times on this podcast, I have immense respect to this company. I think CrowdStrike is one of those legendary companies in general and in cybersecurity in particular. I really love the way they build themselves. I think really highly of the engine that they built. I respect them for, fighting over the years against this monster Microsoft and still winning.
Yes.
So tons of respect. And everything we're saying is with this. There's nothing that's, other than loving what they do and really respecting them. But with power, like always.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Especially when you're in kernel mode.
Yes.
So
by the way,
that's what we need to do.
Who said that, by the way, Lital? As a mother of two nerds.
You will go with the nerdy thing because, of course, I get it
Dave,
wrong.
you know who said with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah, it was Spider-Man's uncle.
Yeah. Exactly. Spider-Man's uncle. Very important person. Uncle Ben.
So I spent a few good almost 5 years in the EDR space, competing at the early days with CrowdStrike. And I can tell you, being at Cybereason, there was an obsession of not being in kernel mode. Cybereason whole Call of Fame, that was what differentiated it from the others. And I think Sentinel-1 is similar in a way.
I think most of the 8,200 companies, because you need to spy on people, they build something that will not require admin permissions to run.
They really didn't want to build something that will be embedded deep in kernel mode of the OS, but rather being in user space. I think we always said what differentiate us, we're not going to cause blue screen. That was the thing. Like the blue screen of shame was not a thing. And we did everything possible. Like I remember Jonathan, CTO of Cybereason, when actually building some capabilities that will do ransomware prevention, protection, kind of like and needing to build some kernel components, was thinking very thoroughly about how can we minimize that? What can we do to not get there? Knowing how problematic, how much of a pain it is, and really learning very well the McAfee, which George Kurtz was the head of at the time, issue that was extremely similar to what just happened because of being in the kernel. So it is a kind of a failure waiting to happen. Everybody understanding the issue of meddling with the Windows kernel can lead to. So it's kind of like, if you are actually doing it, you need to be super careful, which seems like they weren't.
So here's something that I want to talk about. And Denise made fun of me of the fact that I like to do kind of victim blaming in my rants and points. But I think let's take a look at, you have a machine at home.
Myself. My personal one. My work machine.
Your work machine.
I have 2 Windows machines, personal and work machine.
And
both of them were fine. I was shocked. Like Friday morning when the whole thing like started happening, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to start my machine. They have CrowdStrike on them. So like, let's not do it.
So this is an interesting element with the CrowdStrike element of this. Of one of the things that I suspect, I haven't found evidence for this.
Yeah, nobody wrote about it. Maybe we say it first. It seems like it wasn't impacting all Windows machines. Like we have evidence of startup tech companies that weren't impacted, even though they have some Windows environments.
And with all, so some
looking at who was impacted.
So they're talking about the versions and not versions. So first, if you look at the volume of impact, it's bigger by 2 orders of magnitude more than any ransomware ever. So this is something to remember.
It's probably the whole ransomware of a year combined.
It's the ransomware of the last, since ransomware was invented until now, all impacted machines is less by order of magnitude than this single
How
incident.
many machines were impacted? 8.5 million?
8.5 million that we know of. The economic element of how many hospitals, how many. And this is where airlines, insurance companies, banks. And by the way, if you look at it, the people that were impacted, the companies that were impacted, were the slow and ineffective, not so much the vulnerable to begin with. And it's very, very funny because they're really, really slow, like Southwest, that still use Windows 3.11.
Yeah, we were shocked. That's cool.
I'm not shocked. Anything about Southwest does not shock me. The fact that they don't send us on turboprop planes or shoot us in a cannon towards the next destination, that surprises me. The fact that Southwest uses 30-year-old technology doesn't surprise me. I know that there's still places using OS2, and they were not impacted either. By the way, OS2 is also very safe from ransomware because nobody knows how to write OS2 code anymore.
Well, why don't they use mainframe?
So this is the thing that in terms of if you look at who really was impacted, is places that had kiosks and terminals and things like that. That was the thing. Is
it a specific Windows version running on those terminals?
I'm guessing. I'm making this shit up, so don't take me seriously.
That's the first time he ever makes the disclaimer, because most of the time he makes shit up, but now he admits it.
I admit it all the time. I think if you want, we have at least 4 instances of where I said I take my journalism seriously, like Felger and Maz, so I make shit up without any journalistic work. I've said that multiple times on the show. So I'm making this shit up. I have no idea if what I'm saying is true, but I would believe that somebody just didn't patch up their Windows and did patch up their CrowdStrike. That would be my guess.
My assumption is, those are terminals that are not regularly patched because, it's an IT headache to, do a daily patching of that. So maybe they space it every 3 months, every 6 months, every whatever. So OS is not up to date, but for some reason, CrowdStrike, either because it's the default, you cannot not have them automatically push updates, or I don't know, for some reason, the IT admins didn't think about disabling auto updates.
Or the IT admins own the Windows and the security team owns the CrowdStrike and nobody talked about it.
Yes. Exactly. So security, they want to get the, latest malware signatures sent in. not thinking about which type of terminals it will go to and how critical they are if something breaks, while IT knows how critical they are, and they slow down the enrollment of patches and new OS updates to those type of machines.
A lot of these kiosks, this is why I was wondering, how come they're Windows machines and not terminals? Because in the olden days, like when I was dealing with banks in 2001, we were using Citrix almost everywhere, and a solution with Microsoft called Hydra that basically allows me to build Windows terminals. Because that's what I would do. Why
wouldn't you just do a Chromebook connected to a cloud app?
Or set up a Windows machine that has basically an image reboot that is basically a safe image reboot that says, oh, I'm going back to my sources. Something along these lines. An unchangeable... You can burn an image of a Windows that is unchangeable. That basically runs like a terminal.
I think the unique pain of this incident, let's call it this way, was the fact that those endpoints have to be rebooted, restarted manually by a human being. Nothing could have been remote. Somebody had to restart it in safe mode.
Yep.
And that's unfreaking believable in today's world when there is no IT in the building of a remote Delta station.
Yep.
Like you could see that the Atlanta stations were going back pretty fast because I guess in Atlanta Delta has IT people, or maybe the amount of terminals over there were so many of them that it's manually one by one restarting them.
Atlanta and Newark were the longest downs because
it's the biggest
because it's a hub. But places like San Francisco came back relatively fast because they're not really a hub. Also, it impacted primarily...
It just means that they had to have IT people on the ground in those places. Or, I don't know, have somebody come in and...
also,
CrowdStrike sending them people to manually do it.
Also, the delayed effect in U.S. airlines of how they do the airlines really means that every glitch has a carryover effect. Same goes with the U.S. medical systems. Every glitch has a carryover effect. It showed how fragile the systems are, regardless of the computer system. So this is a little bit of that as well. It showed a lot of the fragility of the systems.
I think I feel so bad for IT people. Like when you have this complete fall down of like all your Windows machines and you need to manually go and restart them. This is really like the wiper scenario, right? Huge WannaCry attack, like Maersk has been through, a few years ago, that everything is being wiped down and you need to restart. That was a terrible nightmare. And I don't know if they had like this kind of like what to prioritize first. Did they just go one by one and fixed it? Or like they had a priority list of those needs to
I don't think anybody had a plan. This is the main thing, that nobody thought of what happens if all my machines go into this blue screen mode. And I think this is a problem with a lot of...
How come they didn't after WannaCry? Like, that was WannaCry, basically. It was a big ransomware attack.
Because everybody's thinking this is going to happen to somebody else or happen to one group. So this is the main thing that...
and they think if it's an attack, I have an excuse. Exactly. It's fine. Exactly. It's isolated.
And I think people have not built enough. So people think of, let's say that there is an attack. So if I'm Delta and I go down, I have business relationships with United and I can shift my passengers to someplace else. This made it impossible to shift because everybody was down. And I think part of the interesting element of this is the fact that people, and that's why I think there is the biggest problem with this CrowdStrike element is that it has a shared responsibility. It really has a shared responsibility. It involves Microsoft because they shouldn't be so fragile to something like this. And it's also...
They claimed it's because of regulators. Otherwise, they would have locked the whole thing.
So there's two parts of this. There's the part that is the EU's fault, because it's always the fault of the Europeans. Everything is the Europeans' fault.
You're a little bit racist with this.
No, it's not racist. They're a continent full of multiple races. So it's the fact that they have their...
It's the regulation. Go back and listen to our episode about the Chevron, why it's terrible. It's the fact that they have their heads up their asses about privacy and all other bullshit and forced competitive... There is no competition to Microsoft. Stop. Yeah,
pushing on Microsoft on competition. Agree. There will be no European Microsoft. You guys are slow and stupid. You will not have a European Microsoft. So stop.
There's not going to be another Microsoft, period.
Exactly. So it's
maybe.
So trying to regulate Microsoft versus letting them do whatever they want is bad. Second thing is the fact that Microsoft itself, the regulators themselves, rather than push them towards safety of kernel mode or elimination of kernel mode, or the ability to say, you know what, make sure that people can kick out modules that prevent bootstrapping through that.
I have an image and what about being able remotely bringing back a computer?
Most kernel solutions like CrowdStrike, they want to run in a way that the OS doesn't come up if they're not there.
Yeah, of course, because they don't want to be removed
by malware.
Yeah.
But this is where people need to start asking questions of why can't Microsoft say, you know what, guys, thank you very much, CrowdStrike, you can't be in this mode because you're not necessary for the restart. Yes, you're important for the protection, but you can't be in this situation. So this is a little bit of a Microsoft and CrowdStrike situation of how do you put those modules in place. Then there's the regulators that stick their noses where they shouldn't. And that's it.
Because they know nothing. So
because they know nothing.
At the end of the day, the outcome is worse than what they planned.
Versus saying, hey, all malware solutions, let Microsoft own the kernel and let nobody else go into kernel mode, except for hardware vendors that create drivers. Exactly. Kick everybody out of the kernel mode. Then there's the customers themselves that actually don't listen to how to run deployments and understand how things are deployed. And the fact that it impacted so many big companies that are fragmented, it's most likely than not those little frictions between security and IT when they don't talk to each other. And that would be a big chunk of my guess, because that happens all the time. And people don't draw conclusions into that. And last but not least is the question of, when we were starting Ort,
I knew you will come to identity at the end.
Of course. It's not even identity. It's before that. Is that
if you don't, I will.
I will get to identity. Don't worry about it. One of the key questions that Nico, Matt, and I were thinking through is, when do we need to install CrowdStrike? And the only reason that we were considering doing CrowdStrike, because our solution is everything that we build runs in the cloud. All the developer machines I can take and throw in the trash. Everything that we do, the machines are basically a means to an end. So if all our machines get infected, there's no data loss, and I can take them and throw them in the trash and buy a whole bunch of new machines. And we built everything to be built that way, so we don't need an EDR on the machines, because there's very, 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 very limited data loss, because we have a very strong identity solution.
Exactly. So, is there a world that you don't need CrowdStrike to run in kernel? They could have used user mode, but let's say they tie it with a strong identity provider that, if something bad happens, maybe you don't need to completely eliminate the malware, but you can just block a person from signing in or the application from running.
You shouldn't keep data on endpoints. The whole thing with the EDRs and all things with a lot of these things and how Epic works and a lot of the older systems is they keep tons of private data and snapshots of data on people's machines for the case that
They still have CD-ROMs.
Listen, they all think of what will happen when the network goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in these systems is built
On locally running.
and the network will go away. As a Cisco employee, the network doesn't go away.
Well, it does.
No, it doesn't. When was the last time we had a massive real network outage?
I mean, from time to time, the internet is clunky. AWS, whatever, East Coast goes down. You have those kind of things.
Last time AWS...
The Dean incident.
Dine,
whatever the name is.
The last time AWS had the massive outage, and by the way, I blame my mom because it's all her fault, is when we were taking the train to go to New York City. Remember that one?
No.
We took the train.
I'm trying not to remember those trips.
Okay, so we were taking the train to New York City, and in Thanksgiving, and that was the big outage, the Thanksgiving outage.
Okay,
so that was the.
It happens.
Yeah, but that was like 3 years ago.
The thing is the chances of AWS recovering from a few hours outage is so much better than you, Mr. Hospital, reclaiming back your endpoints. It's like they have the power, the means to actually contain those kind of outages fast.
Yep.
So it's their problem and not your little shop problem.
They're trying to run things on-prem is... You
may want the problem to be Cisco's problem or AWS problem. Yes, there's going to be an outage. But those happen. Like, you cannot secure things from happening.
But AWS and Cisco and Microsoft know what to do better than you do.
Yeah.
At least they're staffed to do this better than you do.
I mean, and they're so critical that they will be brought back. You're not going to be Mr. Little Shop capable of getting back like they do.
Yep. So I think people need to rethink their redundancies. But also, one of the things that I would like to happen is, so it made us think a lot, both the internal teams and the external teams and the bigger teams, of the reason I'm so making fun of the Uncle Ben quote is because my buddy Anil wrote a very long sentence, and I said, that was a very long-winded way of quoting Uncle Ben. And everybody cracked up because he said, yes, we need to understand that we are the critical path of everybody as Cisco. And we need to understand that we're the critical path. So companies need...
I hope you understood it before the CrowdStrike issue.
We did. So old people like me and Neil and Pat that have been around, all of us that are in our 50s, know and appreciate this. And that comes back to the discipline element. We need not only to know that we're doing this, but we also need to be transparent on how we're doing this. And I think this is probably the most important element of this, is not just doing something, but telling people how we do it. And when we tell people how we do it, they will have more faith. And if we tell people how we do it, and they discover that we don't do what we tell them that we do, now this puts people in a very litigious situation because they can sue us. For example, I'm guessing that when people install things in kernel mode from CrowdStrike, they expected it to be a stable environment.
Sure.
Not an unstable environment. So this is a little bit of that conversation and honesty between customers and vendors, and I think this is kind of where things are. Do we have anything else we want to talk about CrowdStrike? Because the last thing I want to talk about CrowdStrike is understanding your posture. This is a really important thing, because as we mentioned, ask yourself, do you need, if you put things in the critical path. So for example, a lot of my conversation that I had with Gabi about VPN in versus not VPNing in. Now I introduced something else as a point of failure. Do I need that level of security? Does SSO actually provide me better solution than a VPN in? Is VPN good enough? Understanding your posture and what does it mean to have any element crashing and have the fewest element crashing between you and providing the service to your customers, running that analysis is a critical one, because Dennis and I argued a lot about what would happen if there was no CrowdStrike on machines.
Yeah, the thing is, I think 90% of the market doesn't even consider it as an option. I mean, don't forget that any regulation today in cybersecurity dictates having an EDR, antivirus, something on the machines. Like, it's not even an option not to. I mean, you can
Why?
have Microsoft Defender. Why? I don't know. It could be lobbying.
No, this is
but this is the assumption of, like, if you ask a CISO, like, what's the minimal viable, like, tech stack you will have, they will say antivirus on the machine, EDR, something. Like, I don't think anyone even question it. I mean, maybe it's the minimum Microsoft Defender for free, enable that, that's fine. I don't think anyone will say, I can skip the antivirus, and maybe it's indoctrination. I don't know. But it's a good question.
So there's antivirus.
I do think that VPN is not kind of mandated.
It is.
Maybe in some, I don't know.
It is mandated in many industries, and many people assume that it is the solution. And by the way, it is for some cases. It is the right solution. If I need to kill a session fast, a system that if it's being compromised, I need to kill the session fast, there's no solution other than VPN today to deal with this, because there's Identity doesn't do this. So this is one of the problems of single sign-out. If I decide to kill a session to a Microsoft application, it will respect it eventually. Try to kill a Slack session. It takes days for Slack to actually respond back and kill the session. Yes.
Okay.
So they only kill sessions at sign-in events. So I need to wait for the sign-in event to end for it to kill the session. So there's a lot of complexities in the systems. So there is good reason to use VPN. There is good reasons to use EDR when you keep data on the machines, but you should ask yourself, do you need to keep data on the machine? One of the arguments that we had when we built CDO is people wanted us to put AVs on our baked images. And I said, no, that image lives for an hour. There's intrusion and exfil tools on the network that detect if something gets exfilled. And I kill the sessions, and I kill the machines. The machines die very, very fast. The machines themselves have very low likelihood because these are not, these machines are immutable. You can't change the image. So there's no reason to install anything on them. This is something that people need to understand. Understand your security posture. Understand if you're using a lot of environments that were impacted were servers that got installed this image that actually don't need that image because they sit behind 5 firewalls and nobody touches them and nobody installs them, and they have an endpoint protection suite that is actually built for servers because nobody's thinking of what the right posture is. Understanding your posture and understanding your security vulnerabilities, understanding your weak points and what needs to be protected, and running basically this in and out and how do I protect scenario, and running this on basically a yearly basis or on every major change is a super important exercise. And a lot of companies don't want to run it because they feel it's time consuming. So they continue to do legacy solutions and solve things because we always did that. If you hear that that's the way we always did it, know that this is the next big disaster.
We're running out of time. I have one last thought in my area of expertise, which is communication and marketing. The good thing and the bad thing. Communication coming from the CEO, George Kurtz, was not good. He didn't apologize well enough, in my opinion. He wasn't humble. It was kind of timely and okay, but he has his way of being, dismissive. And I think the industry didn't appreciate it. On the other hand, if you looked at the communication coming from the CISO, Sean Henry, he did awesome job. He had a wonderful, empathetic, really from the heart of a CISO to, other practitioners. It was a masterpiece in like taking responsibilities, owning it, saying we screw it up, we're fixing it, we're here to help. On the funny side, each CrowdStrike customers got this QR code with, I think, $20 Uber Eats. I think they ran out of whatever they had in the first 10 minutes of them putting it out, because I heard people trying to claim it and getting kind of like, we're done of it. I wonder how much money Uber Eats made out of this. Probably the
Not
kind of
enough.
like...
Not enough.
Yeah. If Omri was around, he probably would have taken the code that I got.
And used it for sushi.
Yeah. $20 worth of sushi. So with that, that's the Didi and Lital take on the CrowdStrike incident. Let's hope it taught you something. If anything, being responsible when you're in kernel mode is something to think about. Thank you for being with us today. If you like the show, please rate and review us and share us with your friends and let us know if there are topics you want us to cover. We will be here next week because we're a weekly podcast. Until next time, have a good time.
Have a good time. Bye.
Bye, Didi.